Today's Talk About It Tuesday question is, what is your take on the BRICS currency, and do you ever see it developing to rival the global standard of the US currency? And let me just explain, I got a lot of questions similar to that this week, so it must be buzzing around on social media because some of the follow-ups were, how do I prepare for the impending US dollar collapse? Should I take my money out of currency and put it in cryptocurrency, or should I stuff it in a mattress? So I've got all these questions centered around this fear that the US dollar is going to collapse because the BRICS countries are trying to create a common currency amongst themselves. So let's just start from the beginning. So the United States dollar is the reserve currency to the world. And what does that mean? So back in 1944, coming towards the end of World War II, when most of the world, we're talking about Asia and Europe, were decimated because of the war. South America was undeveloped. Africa was in shambles due to colonialism. The United States was not only the largest economy, but the most stable and safe country in terms of politically stable, more democratic than some of the other places, huge military, so safe from invasion, which made the economy, right, and we were a major exporter at that time to the world, which made the US dollar make sense to be the standard of value in relation to foreign currencies. And that's what it really means. So at the time, to create a fairness in trade, or at least a fairness and understanding of value, debts were paid in US dollars. Trade of commodities was done in US dollars. And that way it standardized across the globe value in trade and repayment of debts. That makes sense. What happened was the United States grew extremely influential and powerful because it controlled the monetary system and the means of trade and exchange. And all countries had to buy US dollars to have them in reserve. And so the US was able to actually weaponize the US dollar, meaning if you didn't comply to a certain extent, you could be cut out of the international monetary system. You could have major sanctions. And so the United States used it to influence foreign policy, trade agreements, to sway other countries in terms of their practices and the things that they do, and has used it to cripple other countries with sanctions. We saw that with North Korea, cripple the economy. We saw that in the past with Iran, cripple the economy. We see it today with the sanctions on Russia. So now let's fast forward. That was from 1944, right? Now we're in 2023. There are countries who are trying to rival the U.S. not only in economic power, but also hegemonic power in terms of geopolitical sway. China being the number one rival, right? So China has the second largest economy. China is extremely influential and gaining influence around the world. And they want to not be dependent on the US dollar. They want to not be, they not fear sanctions when they make moves that they can be cut out of the system. So China has a major interest. So let's talk about BRICS. BRICS is an acronym: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. So those 5 countries have formed an alliance. It started out really an economic and trade alliance, and now they're really trying to use that to influence some political gain, geopolitical gain in the world. So their whole thing is, we don't want to be dependent on the US dollar. China, of course, has an interest in not wanting to be dependent, and because, again, it wants to surpass the US in geopolitical power and economic power and be the most influential country in the world. And they may have designs on taking back Taiwan, and they see what's happening with Russia and Ukraine and don't want to have to suffer from the severe economic sanctions that they'll face if they do so. Russia, obviously, who has severe sanctions on it right now, has a great interest in creating this system where, because they're cut out of the SWIFT system, the global monetary system, they're cut off from dollars. Their economy is in shambles. And so, of course, they have an interest in moving away from that and moving towards these other countries and having their own currency. India, who for some bizarre reason believes that if they join up with this group, they can surpass China and become the most influential or largest economy in the world. I mean, they have the population, but they don't have the systems in place necessarily to do that. They want to rival China. And South Africa and Brazil, they just kind of, this economy is somewhat stagnant anyway. But the interesting thing is, people are concerned that they want to, because they're using the terms de-dollarize, they want to create a currency that they use to trade amongst each other, right? They're not to become the reserve currency of the world. There's no way in the world people are going to say, okay, those 5 countries who are so different in so many ways. Matter of fact, China and India are in a border dispute. They don't even get along. Russia and China historically have not gotten along, but they have a common interest now because China again has designs on Taiwan, and Russia's doing this thing in Ukraine, and so now they have a common interest to support each other, but they don't like each other. India and China don't like each other. And then you have China, who's a real economic superpower, India, who's an emerging economic superpower, and you have 3 other countries who are just commodity exporters. They're not superpowers at all, so they'd have to be carried in this whole thing. The way that each of those countries views the world is so different. I can't imagine that, other than, again, creating that relationship amongst each other, that it would be influential on a global scale. So, people are concerned about the U.S. dollar collapsing or somehow not being the reserve currency. Far-fetched. And I know where it came from. And it was I'm not even going to give credit to this sham cable station who brought in an economic expert, and then a news source on the internet picked it up and said one economic expert, and it's just said that one economic expert fears the decline of the U.S. dollar. If one economic expert believes that, that means no other economic experts believe that, and so it's not something you have to worry about. The U.S. dollar is actually, in relation to the foreign exchange, has actually increased in value and has been steadily increasing in value. So it's increasing in value, not declining in value. Again, it's not going to affect anything in terms of your savings or or your purchasing power. Inflation in America is based on supply and demand. That's why we're having an inflation issue. It's not because somebody's threatening to replace the U.S. dollar as a reserve currency. So, again, BRICS is talking about creating a currency that they can use to exchange amongst each other instead of being dependent on the U.S. dollar. And they're talking about doing that. They have a summit in August, and they're talking about trying to roll it out then, and then perhaps creating a common currency that's digital amongst each other, that is supported by natural resources and gold, again, that they can use to trade amongst each other. They're offering other countries the ability to use their currency, but again, where's the stability in that? I don't see somebody exchanging the stability of the U.S. dollar, the stability of the U.S. economy, the relative stability of the U.S. Political system and judicial system for those countries, right? That just really doesn't make any sense. So they don't really like each other too much. So I doubt they're going to be very influential in de-dollarization. Now, does that mean other countries might catch on? If that works, start de-dollarizing? Perhaps. It's possible, but not right now. And so it's not a threat to the U.S. dollar. Your money's not going to decline. You don't have to panic. I don't think you should be concerned with it at all. You have bigger fish to fry, locally than to be worried about what is happening over there that has no impact whatsoever on the U.S. economy or your savings, your investments, or anything like that. So, love the question. Love to hear your comments. Please like, share, subscribe. Keep the questions coming. and I'll see you next Tuesday.